Hi, DE Psychology. We have a short lecture today about our what we would call our olfactory sense, and then what we would call our gustatory sense, which is our sense of taste. I don't think anybody really uses that word much, but we're going to talk about these two senses. And the reason that we're going to talk about them together is because they're inextricably kind of tied together. So let's start off with our sense of smell. This diagram here shows us that our sense of smell really is our most primal sense. And the reason that I say that is this diagram shows us that our sense of smell goes straight from our nasal cavity. And you can see the nasal cavity on that diagram there as he smells the rose. It goes straight from our nasal cavity and up into the olfactory bulbs, which lay right at the base of the brain. So this, remember, is the only sense that we have that does not go through the sensory switchboard, which is hopefully you're thinking in your brain, the thalamus. Okay, so it is our only sense that does not go through the thalamus. And this is how we know it is primal, because all animals within the animal kingdom have this sense that doesn't go through a thalamus. It's not developed enough to have to go through a thalamus. So it goes through the nasal cavity. And as we've talked about before, the nasal cavity is all connected in terms of into our cheeks and into our ear canal. That's all connected. And then it hits the olfactory bulbs. Then it hits the olfactory nerve. And then most of the time, for interpretation, that sense of smell will go into the temporal lobe, right onto the sides there. But it is an extremely primal sense that does not need to be routed, again, by the thalamus. Let's move on. So right there is kind of the slide that tells us the intricate way in which the sense of smell goes through into our temporal lobe and also parts of our limbic system. And you're welcome to pause this and write this into your notes. All right. Now, we do have some things that happen with our sense of smell that are kind of really unique and fun to play with. So the first thing I want to talk about is something called nasal passage strain. This is when basically, again, we go back to the idea that our bodies are actually pretty lazy. We're going to conserve as much energy as possible. So one thing that we do is that our body tends to focus energy on one side or the other of a nasal passage. So it's when we alternate left and right as primary sides for smell. Right now, you can do an experiment. And if you close your right nasal passage, your nose, okay, and take a deep breath in, and then do it for the other side, you'll notice one is more clear than the other to take that deep breath in. That's because of the nasal passage strain. We notice this most when we have a cold, where one side of our nose seems really stuffy and the other side we can kind of breathe from. Well, that's the nasal passage strain. And what happens is about every 15 to 30 minutes, depending on the person, it'll switch. And the other side, if the left was open and smelled and was able to breathe very clearly, then in 15 to 30 minutes, the right side, it'll switch. And that's why you're really able to notice it when you have a cold, where you're like, I'm really plugged up on the right side. And then like 30 minutes, you're like, wait, it just moved to my left side. Okay, that's the nasal passage strain. So it's kind of an interesting phenomenon that we really don't use at full force both nasal passages, that we use one or the other, and probably to conserve energy, but we're not 100% sure. The other interesting effect of smell is what we call pheromones. So pheromones are is the smell that animals emit. And again, remember, we are a more evolved species of animal. So therefore, some animals, like dogs, really rely on their sense of smell. That's one of their primary senses. And so they are able to detect small differentiations of odor that each animal emits. That's why your dog, when you go for a walk, is sniffing everything, because they can actually smell what would be called P male, the other P of other dogs, and be able to tell, is that a female dog? Is that a male dog that left that P? And if that is a female dog, was that female dog in heat? Well, because we know animals have this ability, because they have a very attuned sense of smell, that we don't really have, because we have other senses that have developed as our primary senses, our sense of sight and our sense of hearing, that animals are able to detect pheromones. And so people started to theorize, could humans detect pheromones? Could we smell if somebody was in heat? And so they did all kinds of experiments, and basically we found that humans don't have that keen of smell. So there are no conclusive evidence found to influence the response in humans. But just the idea allowed for marketing techniques, such as things like perfumes and colognes and Axe, where many different commercials would claim that it has pheromones in the cologne, and therefore you'll attract, more men or more women because you're wearing these pheromones. But we do know that humans, in terms of our absolute threshold, really aren't able to tell the differentiations of pheromones to tell of whether or not somebody is maybe ovulating or attractive, that type of thing. Now, we do know we are attracted to smell. Usually a deal breaker for people is the smell of somebody. You can be extremely attracted to somebody physically, like their looks, but then you smell them, and if they don't smell like you like, that's usually a deal breaker for many people. So smell does play a role in our attraction. It's just not the pheromones themselves. I'm going to put this video in. I think it's a great video because it helps us to understand how dogs smell versus human smell. And it reinforces that idea that I was talking about, how smell is not our primary sense, but for dogs, it is our primary sense. And I would highly suggest that you watch this video. It's a great video. Now, our gustatory sense, or our sense of taste, is very reliant on our smell. And you have a lab in which I'm going to be giving you in order to do. And I'll talk about that lab here in a minute. So taste, we basically have taste buds throughout our mouth and our throat. And really, with taste, we only have 4 taste qualities. You could say a 5th, which is often debated by psychophysicists as to whether it is really a taste quality. So we taste sweet, sour, salty, and bitter as our taste qualities. Those are the 4 main taste qualities. Some people would add umami as a taste quality in there, even though other psychophysicists would say no, because we don't have specific taste buds for umami. We have specific taste buds for sweet, salty, and bitter. Now, flavor is a sensory interaction. Okay, and that's what we're going to play with here in a second. Things like spicy, that's not a taste quality. Spicy is a sensory interaction of the odor, texture, temperature, and the taste of something. So when we talk about a food that is spicy, it's because you're getting an interaction of everything, the smell of it, the taste, the texture of it, the hot or the coldness of it, on top of what taste buds that it is igniting in terms of stimulation, whether it's igniting the salty taste buds or the sweet taste buds, that type of thing. So what I'd like you to do is watch this video on our taste buds. That's going to help us out. It's an interesting video for 2 reasons. 1, it shows you where the taste buds can be mapped out on the map. And 2, it's really interesting because she's like, the narrator is like on the Star Trek Enterprise or something, and I'm not really sure why. So it's entertaining in that sense also. All right, we're going to go back, and then once you've watched that video, I then need you to get your jelly bean packet that I gave you, okay? This jelly bean packet is for our little asynchronous lab, and we're going to play with sensory interaction. So what I want you to do is take one of your jelly beans, okay? And you're going to take one of your jelly beans, and you're going to plug your nose just like this, okay, so that you can't breathe. And what I want you to do is put that jelly bean in your mouth. Don't do it quite yet. Listen to the full instructions. Put the jelly bean in your mouth with your nose plugged and chew it. What you're going to notice is that the jelly bean has a sugary taste. Your taste buds made for sugar are going to taste it. And then as you chew and you masticate meaning chewing, as you chew and masticate 2-3 times, it tastes the sugar, unplug. And then all of a sudden, you'll get the flavor. You'll notice that you were not able to tell the flavor of your jelly bean until you unplugged your nose. And once you unplugged your nose, you could tell the flavor. But prior to unplugging your nose, all you could do was taste the sweetness that is hitting the taste buds on your tongue that are sensitive to sweet. And that's it. That it took the odor portion of the jelly bean to smell it in order to actually get the flavor. All right. So you can do that a couple of times with your jelly beans. It's kind of a fun experiment. It's always really fun to do in class. Unfortunately, we just didn't have the time to do it with this lecture. And usually it's really fun to see people go, wow, that's crazy. So it's a fun little experiment. Have a good time with that and enjoy a couple of jelly beans on me. All right, guys, that is it. There is a small discussion associated with today's lecture, so make sure to do that. 150 words, please. Make sure you're hitting those or else you do lose some points. All right, bye, guys.